Hey free to play gang, welcome back to another video. So I'm very far behind on this. I wanted to cover this as soon as I can. So previously I talked about Chronos and what are some of the relics that you can keep. I'll put a video link up at the top so you can refer to that. So today I want to talk a little bit more about APEP. Now there is one very strong distinction between APEP and Chronos, and I'm not talking about the relics that they drop. Okay, so I'm more focused on the usefulness of the relics, and what you understand is that from the previous video, probably 4 of these 6 relics are actually worth selling, or rather they have not a lot of use towards like the end game and all that kind of stuff, right? But that is very different for APEP. So what you understand from APEP is that most of the relics here are going to be very useful into the end game as well. So from the start of the game, right, from the early game all the way to the end game, most of the relics here are going to be very good. And in fact, most of these relics, they are not really tailored towards like either DPS or supports and all that kind of stuff. So it is very flexible, very versatile. So a lot of the drops that you're going to get from APEP are going to be worth keeping. Most of it you probably don't want to be selling. So I think for APEP, you should be a little bit more nitpicky with the kind of relics that you're going to obtain, because most of them are going to be useful, right? So without further ado, let's start off with Hades, which is going to be the first set. Now Hades is an extremely important relic set, not only for fodder farming, which you're probably very clear by now, it is also very important for PvP. You can also use Hades to, replenish your HP a little bit better. It is also quite useful in like some content such as Cube Miracle. I think it's also very powerful in Cube Miracle. But let's take a look at Hades, right? So it gives you a 35% lifesteal. Basically, whatever damage that you do, whether it be like a single target hit or an AoE attack, it's going to heal you for 35% of the total damage. So this is going to be not only useful for your DPS espers, but also very useful for like some of your tanky espers, like let's say Dona and Renzi, right? So defense percentage works really well for Hades as well. So in terms of like the main stats, what you want to look for is for your slot 2, what's most important is going to be crit rate and crit damage. Definitely not for like attack and defense and all that kind of stuff, right? And the reason is because I feel like crit rate and crit damage gives you the biggest bang for buck, and this is clearly an offensive relic set. It's not a support relic set. But as for the 4th slot, what you're more interested in is going to be stuff like attack percentage, defense percentage, or even HP percentage, depending on what kind of esper you're running and depending on what content you're running this set on. So for example, if you're running a fodder farmer, you might want to go something like crit damage, attack and HP, or crit damage, HP and attack, and that's where the slot 4 here could be either an attack or a HP percentage. But if you're running like a Dona for fodder farming, then yeah, definitely go for defense percentage instead. And as for the substats, I think generally, just like offensive substats, you have like speed, you have accuracy in some cases, you have attack percentage, flat attack, crit rate, crit damage, all that kind of good stuff, defense percentage as well, or maybe even HP percentage for a little bit more survivability, because after all, Hades would make your DPS esper a bruiser. Okay, moving on to Abiding Panacea. I think this is probably the only relic set that I would say it's a must sell, or rather it's very worth selling. So this is also encompassing like all the relics in the game, right? I feel like Abiding Panacea is not that good. Now the reason why I say that it's not that good, and a lot of you guys are going to disagree or maybe be very confused about it, is because in terms of your healers, what you need is not a big heal. What you need is more regular heals. Because think about your healers, why they are so good is because of the effects that they bring, right? So like for example, Hengrie, the reason why she's so good is not because she heals a lot, but rather because she cleanses your entire team at the same time. Same for Clara as well, right? Clara brings like immunity, brings like a lot of good stuff. So for Clara, Windwalker and Ocean Waves are going to be very powerful for her, especially like, Windwalker gives you a little bit more uptime on your first skill as well, not just your 3rd skill, which means that you're going to have a lot more of that irritating individual heals and all that. But for espers such as Changpu, it could be arguable that, Abiding Panacea could be quite useful for her because she has 2 active heals, and the 2 active heals heal for quite a decent amount. So therefore, because she is already such a regular healer, Abiding Panacea can be quite useful for her in that one specific niche situation. But I still feel like Ocean Waves carry a lot more weight. But if you still choose to use Abiding Panacea, then it's clearly just a support relic set. So what you want to go for support relics is probably mostly going to be HP percentage, right? So just slot 2 HP percentage, slot 4 HP percentage. But if it's a Changpu, maybe you can have an attack percentage somewhere as well. Okay, now moving on to Ocean Waves, this is definitely my most favorite set in the game. It gives a lot of benefit to not just your supports, it gives a lot of benefits to your DPS espers at the same time. So it grants you a 35% chance of reducing all ability cooldowns by 1 turn at the start of each turn. So do take note that it's only at the start of each turn. So like I said, this is not just very powerful for your supports, it's also very powerful for the DPS, especially espers like Tang Yun, who has like, you want to prioritize your 2nd and 3rd skill a little bit more, or like for example Sender as well, So these are some of the espers who benefit a lot from Ocean Waves, and of course like some very fun comps like, Lin Xiao with Ocean Waves, that works as well. So the kind of relics that you want to keep for your Ocean Waves is a lot, right? There's so many different kinds. So you want to keep crit rate, you want to keep crit damage, you want to keep HP percentage, defense percentage, just basically a wide plethora plethora of different kinds of stats. Okay, so you need to pay attention to the kind of stats that you get on your Ocean Waves. Okay, so for example, for slot 2, right, if let's say you're looking at a crit damage slot 2 Ocean Waves, the substats need to be probably need to be more like crit rate, attack percentage, and other kind of stuff. Not so much of like support substats such as like HP, although HP is still relevant, or like speed. Speed is also still relevant. But okay, so a better example is like, let's say if you're looking for HP percentage slot 2, the kind of substat that you want is not going to be crit rate, crit damage most of the time. Okay, most of the time. And as for slot 4, yes, you definitely want to keep like a whole ton of different kinds of stats as well. So there's attack percentage, there is HP, there is defense, but probably not accuracy and resistance, right? Okay, now moving on to the 2 sets. We are starting off with Avatara. This is also one of my most favorite sets. So you grant a 25% chance of using counter attack upon taking damage. So obviously it's just when you receive damage, right? Not like when you take poisons and that kind of stuff. Now, Sword Avatara is very good for a lot of Espers, but at the same time, it is useless for a lot of Espers as well. So this is only useful if your Esper has a very powerful or a very effective first skill. So what I mean by that is like, for example, Lin Xiao, she has a very powerful first skill. So when she counter attacks, she can do like maybe like 40,000 or something like that, take out the enemy at the same time. So that's pretty good. Or some other Espers such as, from the top of my head, Jin Yu Yao, she's probably very good as well because when she counter attacks, she's gonna land a stun. So that's quite important. Hide as well, right? So if you're running Hide with Avatara and Hades, that's how he can upkeep his own HP by, you know, counter attacking and replenishing his own HP that way. But for some Espers, like let's say Gabrielle, it's gonna be completely irrelevant because she doesn't really do anything on her first skill besides like a little bit more damage. So this is also another relic set that, you know, doesn't have a full focus. It doesn't have like a priority to DPS Espers, even though it's pretty good on DPS Espers. It is also really good on your debuffers, really good on your supports as well, especially Espers such as Clara or even Ahmed. So the kind of main stats that you're more interested in is gonna be a wide plethora as well. There's gonna be speed, there's gonna be attack percentage, there's gonna be HP percentage, there's also gonna be defense percentage if you're using on a Dona or Renzi, for example. So that's about it for Sword Avatara. It is very, very useful. Now moving on to Adamantine, this is also a very important relic set. So I need to explain what it does first, okay? So all allies start battle with a shield equal to 15% of max HP, lasts for 2 turns. Now this does not stack in the buff count, but it stacks in effect. So for example, if you have 2 Espers with 10,000 HP using Adamantine relic sets, your entire team will gain a 3000 HP shield. But the thing, it doesn't stack in terms of buff count, and why this is so important is if you're running Espers such as Chloe or Narmer, this matters a lot because the more buffs you have, you know, the more damage you can do, right? Or rather for Narmer, it's like the more buffs you start off with, the more passive procs you have. So yeah, I get asked this a lot, so just take note that it doesn't stack in buff count, it only stacks in effect. Also do take note that, you know, this max HP here that they're referencing is your own max HP, okay? It's not your allies' max HP. So that's why this is so powerful. If you give it to like supportive Espers like Laura or even Gabrielle, this is going to be so effective. Now, because it is more for support Espers, I would highly recommend you to either run with HP percentage on this, which makes a lot of sense for its effects, or speed as well. Speed, I think, is really good for, you know, a lot of different kinds of supports. And then finally, we have Fiery Incandescence. Okay, we call it Fiery, we don't call it Incandescence unless you're crazy. So it increases your crit rate by 20%. This is pretty good. So it is very useful for a lot of Espers, especially if you're lacking in the crit rate department, right? So this can be quite important. So generally, I would still recommend you, for most cases, right, for your DPS Espers to run with Sword Avatara instead of Fiery. But I know sometimes, you know, getting the crit rate sub is really very difficult. So in that sense, I think this is still rather useful. Now, since this is obviously an offensive-based relic set, you would definitely only want offensive-based stats. So probably you might want to go with something like attack percentage, or maybe, but I wouldn't recommend it, defense percentage. So HP percentage is probably not so good over here because there are only defense-based damage dealers and attack-based damage dealers. HP-based damage dealers are very few and far in between, and they are honestly not that strong. So for example, there is Falcon and Ahmed as HP percentage-based damage dealers, but they're not going to do so much damage in my opinion. So yeah, that's it for the relics here. So I hope this explained a little bit more about the relics and what I feel like is good and what is probably not good. So there, like I said, right, there is only Abiding Panacea that is arguably not so useful, where there are like other better relic sets out there. So I tend to just sell off all my Abiding Panacea and that gets me like quite a fair bit of gold at the same time. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, it really helps the channel, and subscribe for more dislike content. Now this has been Daddy Free to Play, and as always, I will see you in the next video.